Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Bhante Suddhaso, and we'll be looking at another discourse from the Buddha today. This is from the Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 7, sutta number 52. So I'll start with homage to the Buddha, and then I'll go through the discourse and give some explanation and take any questions at the end. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhagam. Chapter 7, sutta number 52, which is entitled the Dana Mahapphala. Okay, so this is from the Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 7, sutta number 52, Dana Mahapphala Sutta, which Dana means giving, and Maha means great or exalted or high level, and Phala means fruit. So Dana Mahapphala means great benefits of giving, a very beneficial way of practicing generosity or giving. So the sutta begins, it says, at one time the Buddha was staying near Champa on the banks of the Gagara lotus pond. Then several lay followers of Champa went to Venerable Sariputta, bowed, sat down to one side, and said to him, Bhante, it's been a long time since we've heard a Dhamma talk from the Buddha. It would be good if we got to hear a Dhamma talk from the Buddha. And Sariputta says, well then, sirs, come on the next Uposatha day. And perhaps you'll get to hear a Dhamma talk from the Buddha. Yes, Bhante, they replied. They rose from their seats, bowed to Sariputta, and having paid respects to him, they left. Then on the next Uposatha day, they went to Venerable Sariputta, bowed, stood to one side, and then all of them went together to the Buddha. And after paying respects to the Buddha, then Venerable Sariputta asked a question. So he said, Bhante, could it be that someone gives a gift and it is not very fruitful or beneficial, while someone else gives exactly the same gift and it is very fruitful and beneficial? And the Buddha replies, indeed it could, Sariputta. And Sariputta says, Bhante, what is the cause? What is the reason for this? So this is introducing the central topic of the discourse. So this is talking about generosity. So when one is doing an act of generosity, an act of giving, what is it that determines whether that produces a lot of good results or not so much? And so Sariputta's question is interesting. He's saying, could someone give a gift and it's not very beneficial, doesn't bring much good results? Somebody else does exactly the same gift giving, gives exactly the same gift, but it is very beneficial. So in other words, is there something other than the actual gift being given that determines the quality of good karma that's produced? And the Buddha says, yes, there is something. There is something that makes a difference. So next, the Buddha gives a list of 7 different attitudes one can have while giving a gift, because this is what makes the difference. What makes the difference is the kind of attitude we have during the act of giving. So the first one, he says, Sariputta, take the case of someone who gives a gift as an investment. Pali word here that's being translated as investment is, in Pali, it's sapeka. So sapeka literally means with expectation. Then you're expecting something to come from it. You're expecting something afterwards. So you're giving a gift not without expectation, but rather with an expectation of getting something from it. So it's giving with the hope of getting something for yourself as a result. So he says, take the case of someone who gives a gift as an investment, their mind tied to it, expecting to keep it, thinking, I will enjoy this in my next life. They give to contemplatives or Brahmins such things as food, drink, clothing, vehicles, garlands, fragrances, and cosmetics, beds, housing, and lighting. Says, what do you think, Sariputta? Don't some people give gifts in this way? Sariputta says, yes, Bhante. So this is actually a very common way that people give, especially in traditional Buddhist or Hindu cultures with some concept of karma and rebirth. It's actually quite common for people to practice generosity, thinking by doing this, then I'll have access to nice things in my next life. There's actually one amusing sutta where there was a layman who he was always coming to the Sangha. This was during the time of the Buddha. He was always coming to the Sangha and offering one particular kind of food. And eventually somebody asked him, like, why do you always offer this one specific kind of food to the Sangha? And the man replied, well, because it's my favorite food. And he said, so I'm giving a lot of it to the Sangha because I want to have my favorite food in my next life. And then later on, he died and was reborn as a deva. And there's a conversation recorded of him as a deva talking to one of the monks. And the monk asks him, did you get it? And the man, now a deva, replies, yeah, I got it. So the implication is that he actually did get his intended result. His investment paid off. Of course, it's actually not quite perfect because giving what the monks like would actually be even better karma. So giving your own favorite thing to somebody else, that's actually creating the karma of somebody else giving their favorite things to you. So it's actually kind of missing the point a little bit here. But this is an example of that, an example of giving something as an investment, giving something because you want to have it in your next life. And it's not necessarily bad because one is still practicing generosity. So the examples the Buddha gives here, they're actually all examples of good karma, good action. But he is making a distinction between levels of goodness. So this first one, he says, Sariputta, someone who gives a gift as an investment, when they're separated from their body after death, they are reborn in the company of the devas of the four great kings. So this is the lowest of the deva realms, the Chatu Maharajika realm, the devas of the four great kings. It's still a heaven realm, so still much more happy, fortunate state of existence than a human, but the lowest of the heaven realms. And he says, when that karma and the success, fame, and sovereignty based on that karma are used up, then they return to this state of existence. In other words, that person will be a deva for a while, and they'll have a good time, but eventually their good karma will run out and they'll be reborn as a human. So the point here is that the gift there is finite. So you're giving as an investment, and then once your investment has paid off, then it runs out and you're reborn as a human again. Then the next one, he says, take the case of someone who gives a gift not as an investment, their mind not tied to it, not expecting to keep it, and not thinking, I will enjoy this in my next life. So in other words, not having the attitude just mentioned. But instead they give a gift thinking it's good to give. And here, similarly, the person is born in a heaven realm and stays there for a while and has a good time, and then they return to human existence. So when their good karma runs out, they're reborn as a human. So this is a slightly more refined form of giving. So rather than giving with the hope of getting it back, instead you give just thinking giving is a good thing. So some understanding that it's proper to give. So in this case, the person might not even necessarily have a concept of karma and rebirth. This could be, for example, someone who just has a sense of social propriety. Like they think, oh, it's the proper thing to do. This is what a good member of society does, is they practice generosity. So secular giving would fit in this category as well. So it's not even necessarily thinking, it's part of my religion to give, or giving is morally good. It can be just more generally speaking, like this is the proper conduct of a good member of society. So it can even be a secular attitude that leads to this idea of giving is good. Then the third attitude, the Buddha says, one gives a gift thinking, giving was practiced by my father and my father's father. It would not be right for me to abandon this family tradition. And again, in this case, then the person gives gifts and as a result is born in the heaven realm and so on, and returns after that to the human world. So this is the case of someone who they're practicing generosity because it's a family tradition. So you might be thinking like, oh, well, my parents regularly donated to the church. My grandparents regularly donated to the church. I should probably keep up the same tradition. I should respect what my parents and grandparents were doing. It seemed to work for them. So I'll just keep doing what they were doing. So in this case, it's respect for tradition. So giving a gift because it's traditional within your family. And again, this is still a good thing. It still produces good karma. It still leads to rebirth in heaven. However, once again, it's of limited result. So after a while, the person still runs out of their good karma and is reborn as a human again. Then the fourth one, so another relatively simple one. This one says, one gives a gift thinking, I cook, they do not. It would not be right for me to not give to them. So this one is getting a little bit better because there's a motivation of compassion here. So it's recognizing that these contemplatives and Brahmins that you're giving to are dependent upon other people for their sustenance. They're dependent upon other people for their food. And so it's thinking, well, I have access to food. These spiritual people, these spiritual mendicants, they don't. So the proper thing for me to do is to share what I have with them. Like, I have more than enough. These people depend upon others. I should do what I can to help them out. So here there's a bit of an attitude of compassion because you're recognizing here that the people that you're giving to are actually relying upon support from others. They're dependent upon support from others. And if they don't get support from others, then they'll have a very difficult time. So noticing that the first motivation is actually very selfish. So it's giving because you want to have nice things in your next life. It's very much about me getting what I want. The second and third ones are just more generic, like, oh, this is what you're supposed to do. So giving out of a sense of obligation or duty, whether it's obligation to society or obligation to family tradition. But this fourth one here is where we finally get some genuinely positive motive of compassion underlying here. So it's recognizing that these people don't have easy access to food the way that I do. So I'm going to give to them out of compassion, out of kindness. So yes, a bit more refined and beneficial of an attitude, but still finite. So the results are still similar. The person is reborn in a heaven realm, stays there for a while, depending upon their karma, and then is eventually reborn again as a human. By the way, because the sutta here was abbreviated at some point over the centuries, it doesn't actually specify what heaven realm each person is being born in, but the implication is that each form of giving has a higher heaven realm. Each form of giving results in a slightly better heaven realm, a slightly better state of rebirth. Then the next one, so here we're up to the fifth one. I believe this is the fifth one. Yeah. It says, they give a gift thinking, the ancient Brahmin seers were, this is a list of names, Attika, Vamaka, Vamadeva, Vesamitta, Yamadagi, Angirasa, Bharadvaja, Vaseta, Kassapa, and Bhagu. Just as they performed great sacrifices, I will share a gift. So this is talking then about ancient religious or spiritual traditions of renunciation. So it's reflecting, it's like, okay, so there were these wise spiritual practitioners of old, these legendary or semi-legendary figures, which we see mentioned in many places, who were known for their powerful and profound spiritual practices. And part of that was practices of sacrifice or renunciation. And it's like, well, okay, so these highly respected spiritual contemplatives of old had a practice of renunciation, which brought great benefit to them. Well, I will also practice renunciation in this way, by giving things to others, giving things away. So here, again, it's a act of giving, an act of generosity, which is always a good thing. But here the motivation is about wanting to cultivate a spiritual practice. So this one is a higher category of giving than the previous ones, because here is where one is doing something as a spiritual practice, doing it as a practice not just of giving, but also of renunciation, practice of letting go, of relinquishment, of non-attachment, and doing so with an understanding that this is part of the cultivation of wisdom, part of the cultivation of a spiritual path. So this is what makes this fifth form of giving of a higher level, is because here finally it's something which is being done as a spiritual practice and founded upon the attitude of renunciation, of sacrifice, of relinquishment, of letting go. And then the sixth one is they give a gift thinking, when giving this gift, my mind becomes clear and I become happy and joyful. So here it's recognizing that giving gifts, so practicing generosity, is something which brings immediate positive results to one's own mind. And in particular, it creates the conditions for the mind to enter into deep states of meditation or contemplation more easily. So when we practice generosity, then the mind becomes happy and joyful. That's clear enough. And it also becomes, the Pali word here is pasidati. It's translated here as becomes clear. But pasidati has more meaning to it than just being clear. It also has the similar sense of serene joy. It also has the sense of faithful, as in full of faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So becomes clear is touching a little bit on the meaning of this word, but it also has the sense of, again, cultivating faith. So faith in Buddha, Dhamma. And also that sense of bringing up a sense of serene joy, which is a necessary prerequisite for samadhi, for deep concentration, which itself is a prerequisite for wisdom. So here again, it's giving as part of a spiritual practice which prepares and clarifies the mind to be able to cultivate concentration and wisdom. So this is why it's then ranked a little bit higher, because it's recognizing that giving is something which directly conditions the mind for higher spiritual development. And then the final one, the final form of giving that the Buddha speaks about, he says, so one does not give a gift with any of these prior attitudes in mind, but instead one gives a gift thinking, this is an adornment of the mind. This is equipment for the mind. And so, and then the Buddha says that someone who gives a gift not for any of the previous reasons, but instead thinking this is an adornment of the mind, the equipment for the mind. So this is the highest form of giving that he's talking about here. He says that person after death is reborn among the devas of Brahma's host. So this is the highest of the ordinary deva realms. The only realms higher than that are the realms of the mind only devas. So the realm of the Brahma devas is the highest of the what's usually translated as the fine material world, the Rupa Loka. The highest of the devas, which are still more or less connected with ordinary reality. And he says that when their karma is worn out, then they are a non-returner. They do not return to this state of existence. And this is interesting here because what he's indicating here is that practicing generosity with this kind of attitude is something which helps the mind to relinquish self-identity, to relinquish desire, to relinquish aversion, which are the necessary conditions for a non-returner. To become a non-returner, which is the third stage of awakening, it's necessary that one relinquish self-identity, specifically identification with body and mind, and also to relinquish desire and aversion. So clearing away the lower fetters. So this is pointing to the profundity of this final example of giving. So giving, thinking this is an adornment for the mind, equipment for the mind. Again, it's recognizing that through practicing generosity, this is something which directly trains and develops our own mind. It's something which beautifies the mind. It clears away the defilements of the mind. So beautifying in the sense that it's clearing away everything ugly about the mind. And instead, it's building up something incredibly beautiful in the mind. It's turning the mind into something incredibly beautiful. So the mind of generosity is a mind which is free of defilement. It's free of greed. It's free of aversion. It's free of stinginess. And the mind of generosity is something radiantly beautiful, something which brings blessings and joy to ourselves as well as the people around us. And again, it's based upon the attitude of renunciation. So in giving, we are also letting go. So it's training the mind in renunciation. It's training the mind in this critical quality of the path. Ultimately, Buddhist practice is all about renunciation. It's all about letting go. So this also is why giving is then here called equipment for the mind, because it's preparing the mind to be able to let go also of self-identity, desire, and aversion. So not just letting go of whatever the gift is, but letting go of our inner obstacles to awakening. So this is why here that he says it's preparing the mind for becoming a non-returner. It's preparing the mind for letting go of what's really important to let go of, which is our defilements and delusions. So then the Buddha concludes, he says, this is the cause, this is the reason why someone gives a gift and it is not very fruitful or beneficial, while someone else gives exactly the same gift and it is very fruitful and beneficial. So that's the end of the sutta. So here we can respect the sutta with 3 sadhus, then I'll see if there's any questions. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So hello to the people joining in online. Hello to Nick, John, Jayanta, Manal, Bhumika, Jay, Jerry, Andrew, Melissa, Rebecca, Maria, Aparna, Kit, Molika, Visai, Sud, Nelum, Suraj, Bhumika, and Chandra, and everyone else who's joining in. Good to see all of you. And I see one question here. So Suraj asks, when giving amisadana, so that means giving physical things, material things, he says one could expect beauty, strength, happiness, and one could expect from abhayadana, so giving fearlessness, longevity and good health. But what are the benefits of giving dhammadana? Wisdom. The benefit of giving dhammadana is wisdom. Because it's, again, the result is connected with the action. So when you give physical things, so giving people things like food, water, clothing, lodgings, and so on, then you're creating the conditions for them to have health and strength and good physical conditions. So then you get correspondingly good physical conditions. When you give someone fearlessness, then you're giving them a sense of mental ease. So then you correspondingly get mental ease. And giving dhammadana, you're giving people wisdom. It's the generosity of offering wisdom to others. So then correspondingly, that's what you receive. You yourself will experience easier access to wisdom. And Jayanta says, please donate for future monastery. Thank you, Jayanta. It's very kind of you to say. Yeah, so we are currently trying to open a new forest monastery in Italy, so Empty Cloud, Italia. So if anyone is interested in checking that out, I'll type the link in now. Yeah, so you're welcome to help out with that if you like. And Randall says, according to the sutta, is there a negative effect to giving such as dependency? So this sutta doesn't go into negative effects. It's all talking about positive effects. So noticing that even the most self-centered attitude of giving here, he still gives as having positive results. One is still born in a heaven realm and has very pleasant results of that act of giving. And that's because one is still doing something good. So in practicing generosity, even if you're doing so for selfish reasons, you're still doing a good deed. And that good deed still produces good results. So negative effect to giving, not really. I mean, unless you're giving with the specific intention of harming someone, like giving them a poison sandwich or something, that would be pretty clearly harmful attitude, because there you're actually trying to injure someone. But setting aside that kind of example where you're giving with the actual intent of harming other people, then the attitude of giving is something which is always wholesome. It's always good. So as for dependency, I can't think of anywhere the Buddha talks about gift giving as resulting in dependency. So maybe if you could clarify what you mean by that, because I'm not really sure what you mean. And Kit says, the moments I've given with real generosity have a sort of clarity and feel to them. I found they can be a source of pure energy to draw upon when future times are hard. Yes, it's actually really interesting. So when one of the times that's really notable is when you really don't want to give something. And then you stop and you look at that attitude and you notice how ugly and painful that attitude is. And you drop it and you give something just for the sake of making the other person happy. And noticing how bright and joyful that feels, noticing how easeful that feels. As you let go of the thing you don't want to give, you cultivate kindness and compassion, noticing how the mind transforms. It transforms from this kind of ugly, tight, self-centered mode into this bright, spacious, relaxed mode of relinquishment and compassion. So yeah, it is actually powerfully transformative practice. The practice of generosity is something which transforms the mind, opens the heart. So it helps us both in ordinary good karma, but also in training the mind for awakening, as is mentioned here in the suttas. And that's the last question. And so Randall, if you want to give your further explanation, maybe in monk chat this evening. So this evening we'll have monk chat. So the opportunity to ask any questions related to Buddhism. So if there's no other questions, you have a question, go ahead.
So you were mentioning earlier how when one runs out of good karma, then they're born as a human. I was kind of confused on what you meant by that. Did I miss something?
So, well, good karma is finite. Fortunately, bad karma is also finite. Everything is finite. So if you give a gift, then you cultivate a certain quantity of good karma, which then will result in a certain quantity of good results. So once that runs out, then you'll go on according to whatever underlying karma is present, which will then mean rebirth in human realm if you're lucky, or lower realm, so maybe as an animal. So the suttas seem to indicate that the kind of default rebirth, so human realm is classified as being a little on the positive side, and animal realm as being a little on the negative side. So the default state would actually seem to be somewhere in between. So either a not very fortunate human, so lower end of the human realm, or higher end of the animal realm. So assuming somebody had no residual good karma or bad karma, they would seem to wind up either on the lower end of the human realm or the higher end of the animal realm. Yeah.
And is that from coming from a Deva realm specifically, or?
So in this specific case in the sutta, that's what he's talking about. So because the Deva realms are about strong good karma. To be born in the Deva realms, you need to have strong good karma. So that's finite. Once you've experienced the results of that, then it runs out. It's kind of like if you work really hard for a while and you save up a bunch of money and then you take a few months off to go on vacation. And eventually your money runs out. And you have to end your vacation and go back to your not so nice life anymore. Less pleasant life. That's what it's like. So you build up your good karma, and as a result, you get to have a nice vacation in the heaven realms. But eventually your savings run out and you have to go back to work. Okay. Yeah.
I read somewhere that even the person to whom you give the gift is important. For example, if you give money to a person that you know that will use that money to buy, drink, and get drunk, there's something that is mentioned, or is something that they added later. Or if you give to a monk that you know that he will use those things to practice, is it the person to whom you give the gift important, or just not mentioned?
So you're asking about whether the person you're giving the gift to also affects the quality of the karma.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is mentioned in other suttas. He does mention, the Buddha does mention, when he goes through this kind of distinction, he does first emphasize that giving a gift is always good. It always produces good karma. Says even just like giving a scrap of food to an animal is very good karma. And he says even giving things to evil people, immoral people, is also very good karma. But it's much stronger good karma to give to moral people, to give to good people, to give to spiritually developed people. And of course, the best good karma is to give to monks who are sincerely committed to practicing the Dhamma. And even higher than that is giving to a community of monks. He says the highest is actually giving to a mixed gender community. So community of both male and female monks. So higher than giving to single gender communities. And he says that's even higher than giving to a Buddha. It's actually higher good karma to give to a mixed gender community of both male and female monks than to give to a single Buddha. So yes, definitely also the kind of person that you're giving it to does affect the strength of the karma. But that, again, it has to do with your own intention in mind. If you're thinking like, oh, I'm giving $5 to Bob so he can get drunk tonight. Well, what does that say about your own mind? As opposed to saying like, oh, I want to support these monks because they're practicing and teaching the Dhamma, which will bring so much goodness to the world. It's a very different attitude of mind than helping Bob get drunk tonight. So again, it has to do with your own state of mind and how it affects your relationship to the gift giving that you're doing. Does that make sense? Okay. And okay, Randall has some further clarification. He says, I observed how a generous person may give, yet create a sense of dependency and expectation on the receiving end. This attitude versus empowering a person in a difficult situation. For example, giving money for training versus giving money for food. I'm still not understanding your question, Randall. I'm not getting what you're driving at here. So a generous person may give, yet create a sense of dependency and expectation on the receiving end. This attitude versus empowering a person in a difficult situation. Okay. The first thing I would say is don't overthink these things. So remembering that generosity is always good. Giving is always good. So practicing generosity is always good karma. So yes, it is also even better to deeply think, what can I do that will be of the most benefit? That is extremely good. So in terms of quality of good karma, then yes, if you actually take the time to really think, what can I do that will bring the maximum benefit to this person? That is really good karma. So it is a much stronger form of gift giving. That's because that's incorporating consideration into the act of giving. So this wise reflection of what will actually bring long-lasting benefit to the person, the strongest benefit to the person. So yes, that does create a stronger good karma. And Palita says, what about people who take advantage of your generosity? How do you deal with that? Well, with compassion, because when other people try to take advantage of someone, they're making bad karma for themselves. And that's really sad. So have compassion for that person. But also recognize that if that person is acting in a harmful way towards you, then you also need to take care of yourself. So you might need to get some distance from that person. Don't make yourself a target for them. But rather, keep a bit of distance. So you don't want to intentionally put yourself in harm's way. So if somebody is trying to take advantage of you, then yeah, it is good to take a step back from them so that they don't have that opportunity to be of harm. And Melissa says, if immoral people scammed me out of my properties, will it be seen as my giving? No, it's not giving. Somebody stealing from you is not you giving. It's somebody else stealing from you. So if you give something to someone, it's when you think, I want to give this to that person, and then you give it to them. If somebody else steals something from you, then you never did an act of giving. You were just being stolen from. So no, that doesn't count. And JS says, if we give to Buddhist insights, can that be used for empty cloud Italia? Yes. Ideally, just include a note with the the donation, saying it's for Empty Cloud Italia. But yes, donations for Empty Cloud Italia can go through Buddhist Insights. And Shanika says, if someone is not part of our lives anymore, but we are grateful and have gratitude towards them, can we offer blessings to them? Is this a form of giving that is practical? Yes, you can do that. So bringing up a heart of metta to that person, dedicating merit to them, wishing blessings on them. Yes, this is something the Buddha did recommend in a few places in the suttas. So yes, that is a way of practicing generosity. And it looks like that's the last question online. You have another question?
Yeah, I have 2 questions actually. So I was I had trouble understanding the differences between the 5th and the 6th one.
Let's have a look here. So the 5th one is the one about the ancient Brahmin seers who performed sacrifices. And then the 6th one is about my mind becomes clear and I become happy and joyful. Those ones.
Mm-hmm.
So the 5th one is about following a ancient spiritual tradition, but you don't really understand why. So it's lacking the wisdom component of understanding why we do these spiritual practices. It's just thinking like, oh, it's the tradition, it's the religious tradition, so I just do what the religious tradition says to do. Whereas recognizing doing this practice clarifies and purifies the mind in these particular ways. There's a wise understanding of the immediate effect of doing these spiritual practices. So that's the difference between the two. So both of them are about practicing generosity as a spiritual practice. The difference is that the number 6 here is about doing so with the wise understanding of exactly how it is a spiritual practice, exactly how it purifies and benefits the mind. Understood?
Yeah, it's kind of like when I was like that when I was younger and didn't have anything, didn't really know why I was doing it, but now it's like I know why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And then one last question I had was, so are the monks, are the gifts that monks give Dhamma talks? Like how
Yeah, giving Dhamma talks is a form of giving gifts. I don't need to be here doing these things. So yeah, giving Dhamma talks is a form of giving gifts. It's called Dhamma Dana. Actually, the Buddha said Dhamma Danang Sabbadanang Janati. So the gift of Dhamma exceeds all other gifts. Yeah. So Norma says, I give my time to many in a wholesome, caring way. I believe it is giving. Someone, family want more and more. It is difficult to say no. Even end of life is involved. There's been so much deceit and alcoholism involved. How can I give my time and effort? Well, Norma, it's really up to you to decide how you want to give to others and in what way you want to give to others, and also to figure out for yourself what are your own appropriate limits. So do what you can, but also be realistic. And also recognizing that sometimes the ways of being of benefit to others is not necessarily exactly what the other person wants. So you need to apply your wisdom and investigation skills to try to figure out what you can do that will be of the most benefit, which is not necessarily what they want. Kind of like how small children often want to just have sweets all the time. But if you just feed children nothing but candy and dessert, well, that's really bad for them. So that's not practicing kindness. It's generosity of a sort, but it's actually quite destructive. Instead, you want to try to give them things that will be good for their health. So that's a bit more refined. It's still fine to give sweets and such because it's the attitude of generosity, but it's better to give things that will be of long-term benefit to them. So this is the more refined form of giving, is it's considering how can I give in a way that will be truly beneficial to the recipient. So the mind of consideration. Yeah, taking the time and effort to really consider how to be of the maximum benefit. So Melissa says, if my giving my ex-husband the house with all things in it a gift, it was in my heart that he have a home for his new wife. Yeah, if your attitude was an attitude of giving something you have to somebody else, then it's an act of generosity. Yeah. That's the last question. So I think we'll go ahead and conclude at this time with 3 more sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you all next time.